Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Remember, we have Parasport Nation coming up after our edition of Kelly & Company. On today's show, we chat with disability archivist Michael Marlatt about how to preserve film history through accessible and inclusive ways. In a moment, we'll get into that conversation with Michael. Plus, blind lore and disability advocate David Lepofsky gave a keynote speech at this year's Pushing the Boundaries conference, and we hear the highlights around his vision for the future of inclusion and the playbook for fresh, young advocates to follow. We've been preserving these great conversations just for you. Hold on, they're on the way.
This is Kelly & Company.
Always lining up the greatest conversations we can have, the most fantastic content too, but of course we're biased, as we always say. I'm Kelly MacDonald, host of the show. The lady over there, Nisreen Abdul-Majid, joining me, and we're always set for great conversations and fun on the program. Before the show, we were having one of those DJ talks. And one of the things we got into, and it was interesting, Nisreen, because I think I always think of DJing at a place where there's dancing, movement, maybe the odd brawl or something like that. So I think of protecting equipment, but not really your first go-to at first, going out DJing. Yeah. Is that due to the kinds of weddings? Of course, you hope there's no family brawls, but circumstances that you were hired for?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't think of, protecting my equipment in that way until I had this incident of somebody who was very drunk and almost spilled their entire drink all over my equipment. And then,
yikes.
Yeah, it was horrible. It was horrifying. And I kept telling them to back off. And, there was no one around me to kind of really help me until I was very upset about it. And then somebody came in and tried to push the guy away because he kept coming closer and closer. But yeah, you don't really think of protecting your equipment until that happens, which is kind of unfortunate because, these equipment are not very cheap, as you know.
Well, I always think, when I used to think about DJing, I think I'll never hear if anyone's asking for anything. But that in itself brings its own kind of I don't have time for that, or I've got it on a playlist and I'm going to use that anyway. Because most things I'd imagine people ask for the most part, over 4 hours, you're going to end up playing.
Yeah, I do get a lot of song requests, and some of them are interesting requests, but regardless, some people actually get mad if I don't play it right away.
Yep. And I just told you I wanted that song. Yeah, but you told me 30 seconds ago.
I'll play it. That's literally it. That's exactly it. That's how it plays out. So,
but it now.
Yeah. And then when I actually play it, they don't dance to it, so that bugs me so much. Yeah.
Or they left already, or they've gone off to get more food or something. I was the annoying kid at weddings and so on. When anywhere there was a DJ, when I was 10 or 11, with my love for broadcasting, I was always asking, "Oh, so what's your progress? What? What's your progress?" Standing on my tippy toe. What do you do here? Folks, remember to check out our podcast from your platform of choice. Also, our YouTube page. We'd absolutely love to have you enjoying and engaging in the content over there. Give us a rating and review if you would while you're checking out the podcast. But definitely subscribe to our YouTube page.
How do we pay attention to preserving art and cultural history and do it accessibly and inclusively? Michael Marlatt, a disability archivist, accessibility consultant, and archival producer, is working on it. Michael recently completed his PhD in communication and culture at York University, where he focused on closing accessibility gaps in archival education, focusing on students with disabilities or neurodivergence and people living with chronic illness. Welcome, Michael.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me today.
It's great to have you. So, were you always a history buff before narrowing in on this focus of accessibility in archival?
So I was a big film history person, film buff growing up. We watched movies, lots of movies all the time from different historical periods and regions. And yeah, I also then was also quite interested in history as well. like I kind of come from an arts admin background, so I was doing some volunteer work with Heritage Toronto, and then I found that there was a world where those kind of both came together in film archives and archival media preservation.
That's amazing. You're disabled yourself, Michael. Did you run into issues firsthand, personally, before taking it professionally around accessing history and education?
Most definitely.
Yeah.
First, definitely started experiencing that when I was working in film festivals. And then I got into the archival film field, got my master's degree, was looking to get into the field and work. And that's where I really noticed some of those barriers. Probably the biggest one being the, must have valid driver's license. Just as someone with epilepsy who can't drive, that was definitely something I found quite limiting. And also there's a lot of, in the field, I would say there's an overemphasis on, must be able to lift 50 pounds. And when I'm working with archives on their accessibility strategies, I ask them when was the last time they even weighed any of their archival boxes,
Yes.
if any 50 pounds, because quite often it's not.
Yeah, I would imagine people just keep shoving stuff into it, anything they've got, and it would be a real trick to get around it, because you'd show up and, no, these are 70, 80, 100.
Yeah, but I think usually more than anything, they're lighter, and there's just this assumption that they're going to be 50 pounds.
Right.
When I'm talking to a lot of archives, I'm just like, have you weighed these boxes? And it's a small part of what we do, and there's equipment to help us, and it just makes it seem like we're just carrying these giant heavy boxes of 35 millimeter film all the time, which is not the case, right?
Yeah. This work of getting film history and culture retrofitted to be accessible sounds like enormous work. How challenging is it?
Very. It's just because it's not really something that it's really been much of an emphasis before, I think. Yes, people are very well-intentioned. People have been quite receptive. It's been a positive atmosphere for sure. There's just a lot of questions to be had, and also making it retroactively trying to do all of this is so difficult, because I guess we live in a world right now where there's an assumption that everything is digital or born digital, and everything's been digitized, but that's not the case at all. There's a ton of material that's yet to be digitized, and trying to retroactively make that accessible, it is going to take a lot of work for sure.
So on a side note, Michael, how about the care when you go to different places, find stuff? Has there been has there been an attempt to really make sure they're in the right room, temperature-wise, all the little things that one would do to make sure that this stuff is safe here, nothing's going to get into it? And have you found things that have just been, obviously, can't be used, can't be restored because of whether the lack of care, or just due to the age of it and how it's decayed?
It really depends on the institution. Of course, the larger, more government-funded institutions are going to have the rooms that are more, climate controlled or temperature controlled, have access to the equipment. Film and media is quite niche when it comes to the archival field and preservation. I've definitely come across things that are extremely unsalvageable before. Things that were decades old that were just kept in a basement somewhere, and it can get kind of gross sometimes, but then it's also, you never know what you're going to find. There's always there's a lot of, it's a lot of fun as well.
We've got the county files over at Tim's place. Come on, let's go there. His wife will make us up coffee and stuff. I can imagine that is such a challenging, the range of places that you've had to go or would have to check out content like this, and the range of different things that you've been able to access must be really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I think the funniest was the IMAX films that were underneath the Cinesphere, that were just left by the water, that hadn't been touched in a very long time.
Oh, God. Oh, do you want to tell us about some of the other projects that you've been a part of and how successful, since I'm bugging about all these ones, the retrievals that may not be so, but tell us about some of the ones that have been successful, and or at least how successful it felt to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's the accessibility work that I've been doing for the last number of years that I think, has been quite successful. It's a field-wide thing. There's a lot of changes that need to be made, but I was able to finish this PhD last year, where I was specifically working with students and programs on archival accessibility, moving image archival accessibility more specifically. And the students were engaged and was able to kind of go through and look at the curriculum of all of these programs and just think about where we could fit accessibility in, just because it had never really been emphasized previously.
Mm-hmm. And how do people react when you tell them what you do? Are there a lot of people that know your profession?
Not really, no. I mean, when I'm working with university students, I'm working, I'm doing a lot of guest lectures in, like the library sciences, so they'll know. And when I'm working with specific archives, obviously they'll know. But yeah, if I'm talking to people in the general public,
it's
or
pretty
even
amazing though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, even
That's
many
really
of those
wild.
in the film field don't really know what archives are, or how filmmakers think about where their films are going to be, 50, 100 years from now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that quick, hey, we did it, it's done, moving on to the next project. So is it taught at schools, this kind of studies, and on any level at all, with you doing lectures and stuff? I'm assuming there is, to some degree.
Well, I mean, there are moving image archival education programs. A lot of that's kind of, hands-on, get into the field, do the actual work in archives. We're starting to see more of it focus on accessibility, probably in the last 10 years or so, I would say, especially within the librarians and library sciences. General archives and archival education, yes, but when it comes to media archives and accessibility, it's not really something I've come across personally, other than the work I've been doing for the last years.
Oh, awesome. And where are you turning next for collaboration?
So I'm still trying to think that through. I'm working with a number of archival institutions, just doing these one-off workshops now. But I would really love to do something on the history of disability on screen in Canada.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whether that's a book, or I would love to maybe even set up some sort of fellowship, so that, filmmakers, because I'm not a filmmaker myself, but being able to collaborate with filmmakers on the creation of maybe a documentary or docu-series on the history of disability on film in Canada.
Wow, that'd make a great AMI project, Michael. Wow.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Trying to end that out. Oh, this is amazing. Thank you so much, Michael.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for having me.
We were joined by Michael Marlatt, who was giving us a window into the world of accessible archiving. His work is a powerful reminder that how we preserve stories and who gets to shape that process matters just as much as the stories themselves.
Folks, you can stop and email us. You may have some questions about what we do on the show, or thoughts that you'd like to share with us. kellyco@ami.ca. We also love to hear your voice, so you can call us at 1-866-509-4545. That's 1-866-509-4545. And maybe we can use your message on the air if you don't mind. 2 weeks ago, we had Susie Sokol on the show. She's the chair of the Pushing the Boundaries Conference Planning Committee. And she joined us to discuss what to expect at their recent event. Senior producer Matt Agnew made his way out to the two-day conference to see what people were saying about disability inclusion. David Lepofsky, he's a lawyer, disability advocate, and a familiar voice here on Kelly and Company. He gave the first keynote speech at the conference, and you're about to hear some highlights from his speech, including his vision for the future of inclusion and the playbook for young advocates. Take a listen.
We live in a world around the world that is designed, organized, and operated pervasively on a fundamentally idiotic first principle. And that idiotic first principle is that it's primarily for people without disabilities. The buildings we go into, the public transit we ride, the schools where our kids study, the curriculum that is taught to them, the equipment used in those classrooms, the workplaces where we work, the stores where we shop, the products that are sold in those stores, the laws under which we operate, and the courts that administer those laws are all designed and operated based on this ridiculous premise. Now, it's not that there's a conspiracy against us. No one sat down rubbing their hands together with glee and said, let's design and operate the world this way. In fact, when this is pointed out often, I'm told, oh, we didn't think about that, and we didn't mean it, as if that was the defense. Folks, that's the offense. That's the problem. But here's the thing. If the world was intentionally designed on that premise, if there had been some global conspiracy against us, guess what? The world would not look very different than it does today from our perspective. So whether or not it's intentional or conspiratorial does not matter. Now, I want to find out if this topic touches you personally. I'd like you to raise your hand if you have no disability now and are certain you will never get one for the rest of your life. Please raise your hand. I don't see any hands. I never see any hands. Welcome to the weirdest minority of all. Because you see, everybody has a disability now or is bound to get one later. So we are the minority of everyone. So when I use words like absurd and ridiculous and idiotic, I mean it. Because the world is designed in a way that ultimately works to the disadvantage of the minority of everyone. There are, at a level of principle, historically, two different categories of response. And I'm going to be blunt. One I like, one I despise. One is a response of charity. And I don't mean charity like who you give your money to. Of course, it's important for us to share the resources we have when we can. It is an attitude of charity towards people with disabilities. Oh, those poor unfortunates. Their lives must be miserable. I feel bad for them. I'll feel better if I give them some money. And I'll feel better if I can go home and smile thinking, what a good person I am, and all that kind of stuff. And what gets even worse in this model, they're so inspiring how they cope with this horrible life they have. The charity treatment or perception of people with disabilities is one that has pervaded human history for much of human history. The other vision of people with disabilities, and the one that I embrace, is that of rights, of equal rights. People with disabilities are entitled to full participation in a barrier-free society. People without disabilities can't do everything. People with disabilities can't do everything. Get over it! We don't want to be inspiring. We want to be equals. And we will have varying severities of disability from a biomedical perspective, but we all share a desire to live, to enjoy, to thrive, and be happy. An early realization in my life, learning from others, that no, the biggest problem facing us isn't our disability, but rather is public perception of us. The attitudes are the problems. In other words, it's not my eyes, it's in their head. And if only we could be treated as equals, life would be good. And that would be the end of it. So some of us read print through our eyes, some use Braille, some use audiobooks. We all read in varying degrees and in varying ways. And this led any number of people within the disability community to say, the biggest problem facing us are the attitudes of others, so the solution is educate others. We've all said that at some point, right? The idea, let's raise awareness. The problem is, it didn't work. Yeah, people gave speeches and people laughed at their jokes and then they were inspiring and so on, but barriers kept popping up. And people kept getting denied jobs too often, or denied equal educational opportunities. The idea that raising awareness will solve our problems is a ship that's not only sailed, it's a ship that's sunk. My vision of the future of disability advocacy here and elsewhere is that it could well look very different than it's looked like in the past. In the past, it's been left to nonprofit service-providing charitable organizations in many ways to provide the leadership in this area. And they, of course, have a very important role to play, and a huge credit to organizations like RENA, like Holland Bloor who are here, for their major roles in helping organize all candidates' debates in both the federal and provincial elections just this past winter. But my vision of the future, frankly, borrowing from the Israeli model as the startup nation in the IT sector, is the startup nation of disability advocacy. You don't need a huge organization. Get 10 people together on a Zoom meeting, take your smartphone out and shoot a video about another stupid public building built with our money that is replete with idiotic barriers. Excuse me, see further the new Toronto courthouse on Armory Street. And you can find out what a couple of people with a smartphone and someone who knows how to edit video, not me, and someone who knows how to talk, me, and talk. And next thing you know, you can get issues like this on the public agenda. I really think, in many ways, that's the future. As long as you can see the creation of startups, you don't need money. Zoom is free. YouTube is free. Smartphones, if people have them, have the gear on the RDD. Social media is free, as long as people have an internet connection. Get people starting the argument at that level. I remain the eternal optimist, because we've swum up Niagara Falls. We've done it time and again. We've done it against the odds. That's where we live. And I believe we can do it again and again. And our capacity to do it now is stronger than ever.
Wow. What a conversation. Of course, that's David Lepofsky, keynote speak a couple of weeks ago at the conference. We'll get into that a little bit more in just a moment. But I have to say, Nisreen, right off the top, what does the minority of everyone mean to how we actually would frame inclusion in policy, culture, art, when it comes to those areas particularly, based on what he said off the top?
He brings up a really good point in terms of, I think it really means that every person is part of a minority in some way, whether it's through identity, experience, ability, belief, or even a circumstance. And that inclusion isn't just about accommodating a select few, but about recognizing the full complexity of human diversity. He really brings up a really good point, whether everybody has a disability or will get one in the future. And that when somebody says, oh, it doesn't concern me, I'm not part of this, it's not going to impact me in some way of, removing those barriers or making this more accessible and accommodating that, it really does affect you. Whether it's going to affect you in the future or affects you now, it doesn't matter. It affects everybody. It really impacts everybody. So I think it should be implanted in people's brains that this is it. Like, there's a minority in everyone.
Yeah. I always think of the untapped resource that the disability community has. And when we talk about whether you have one now or in the future are going to be, maybe, you'll have a disability, but mostly you have people in your world. And it isn't wrong to note the disability. It isn't wrong to support. It is wrong to be closed-minded about what people do and put them in a box.
Yeah, exactly. It's unfortunate.
So how do you see the charity versus rights model showing up as it is the way he was mentioning in meeting, fundraising, and daily interactions? I mean, we talked about this a bit with Fern yesterday. Particularly, I think about the gentleman said, I've had a lousy day. Let me buy you food because I was purchasing breakfast. And this man said, no, let me do that. Again, some would argue, gee, that's very kind. That's very nice. But we're also looking at he's not lining up everybody and doing it for everyone to make himself feel better. There's that viewpoint of I've got a white cane in my hand.
Yeah, I think, this is interesting. Yeah, we spoke about this a little bit yesterday, and just to reiterate, I can't even say the word, but you'll see in a lot of news stories that they view the poor, displaced, or people with disabilities as helpless. And for people, for example, a news story is about a person with a disability overcoming, quote unquote, overcoming adversity by doing something, a normal thing, whether it's opening up the door or whatever it may be, rather than exploring the barriers that they face of their rights being denied. No, they focus on, oh, this person is heroic for helping this person who has a disability open the door, just to make them feel good. And they see that as heroic, but they view people with disabilities as, oh, poor thing, this person's struggling, this person's that. So it really, that's how people see on social media. That's how it is.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's the way you tell that story. It's the way the media delivers in reporting a story. What about his vision for the startup nation of disability advocacy led by grassroots action? I like the fact that so many of us can do so little, just get around, film something, talk about it, and put it out there, because I fully believe a lot on social media. People just want to hear stuff. They don't want to be preached at, but you got to put it in a context that makes them say, oh, that's silly, or oh, that's reasonable, or hey, he does the same thing I do.
I think that there's so much that you can do, especially on social media. The Startup Nation, his vision of it, I really agree with that. All it takes is what he said. All it takes is 10 people on Zoom to make things happen. It really, the little things will make a difference, and I think that's what people have a hard time believing.
You betcha they do. Thanks, Nasreen, for your opinions, your thoughts, as we had a great discussion we were able to have with the Pushing the Boundaries conference, which just came out, and that concluded in Toronto with major conversations, workshops, and network opportunities for people with disabilities, people with a mission for inclusion, and anyone else with questions about making an inclusive world. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Kelly & Co. AMI. On our next show, we have a wellness note for you. Grab your hanky and kerchief, because pollen counts are so high this spring. Jenny Bovard will be here to help us guide through the worst of the allergy season. We're waving at you. Talk to you tomorrow.
Thanks for tuning in to Kelly & Company. Follow us on all social media, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more.